Welcome back to Animated Animators, the show that is kind of like a Twitter thread. Usually I have something funny that I think it's funny that I wrote that comes after that, but I didn't think of one today. So I'm sorry.
It's because this one is the most literal of all of them so far.
Yes, it's true. I am Nate Thomas.
Joined by Nick Arbeiter.
There he is. And today, like Nick is alluding to, we are just gonna we straight up just pulled like 10 or 11 tweets that we think are interesting or are relevant to our industry, or for whatever reason we think people should see or read, or they should follow those people.
A
None of these,
talking point, if you will.
yeah, a good talking point, free content. Um, I want to preface all of this by saying, so we these are all people that either both of us or one of us follow on Twitter, and we have gone through and tried to make sure that we get everyone's names correct and where their current role is and what their preferred pronouns are. There's always a possibility of messing that up. So apologies if that is the case. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring up our list here, and I will be putting the screenshot up of whatever the tweet is on camera in post. The magic of video editing. Unfortunately, if you're an audio listener only, you'll just have to, we'll read the tweet out, but you'll have to just imagine the way it looks on twitter.com. So the first one is by Pam Barrera. Pam, she is a senior animator at Icon Creative, and the tweet reads, "It talks a lot about the good character of an animator whenever they recognize that their work is a little part of something big created by teamwork. I just like it a lot when people recognize their team too." Um, it's it seems obvious, I think, just to say like that's a great point, but a lot of times people do forget that they are part of a bigger picture and that their particular discipline is not king. It's not
End
the
all be all.
yeah, not the end all be all. And the goals that you might have are not necessarily the goals of the let's say it's games. They're not the goal of the game, or of maybe just the designer that you're working with. I think one of the other tweets down the line here kind of alludes to this as well, but the amount of work that you do, you want to make sure that it has an impact, a positive impact on the people behind, or that come after you in the process. You don't add a bunch of work for people just to get your tiny little bit of polish in.
Something that I have a little bit more recently begun to realize is, apart from purely looking at an animation, obviously, you can make the nicest animation in the world. It's still on somebody else to get it to work, potentially on somebody else, I should say, to get it to work and show up to the player how you animated it. That person, I'm not gonna say it's like an equivalent level of like time per se. Hopefully it's not. Animation takes a while. Hopefully putting it in game does not take as long. But it's very easy for that input to get broken, to break an animation. It is something that I've become more and more aware of.
Absolutely.
So to any animator working in games, thank your tech people. Thank your engine people.
I did forget to say I'm also going to include their handle. So that was Pam Barrera, and the handle is at my life as underscore capital P Pam. Yeah, just a great follow. All of these are great follows.
If you have the inkling that you want your work to be recognized by somebody, that means that everybody else that came before you and after you also probably has that same feeling. Just remember that.
It's what is it called? Like main character syndrome, where you think that you are like everything just begins and ends with me. Everyone else is a NPC or whatever, and that's I mean, you're a sociopath if you think that, but that's not the case. The next tweet is related to this, and this is from our good friend Eddie Gonzalez, who was on our last episode. who was or is, excuse me, we're going to say technical director at Titmouse, working on The Legend of Vox Machina. And I always love Eddie's tweets. The handle is at SNRDIBS at Send Your Divs. And this one, like every other one, is good. And it says, behind every good animation is a rigger who let us do everything we dreamed of. For LVM, Kat was that rigger. Kudos to her for tolerating each of my, quote, can we do this and this and this? And yeah, truer words have just not ever been spoken. And I think that underneath that, because he quote tweeted her when she posted something. Beyond that being just a good thing to remember as an animator, Kat did this incredible mock-up picture where she used the actor from
Matt Mercer, the DM
show.
of Critical Role.
Yeah. And she used his face as he acts out these characters and use that as reference when creating the rig for Thordak. And it's just sorry, one of the dragons.
No, you got that right. Good job.
Yeah. So many dragons. And they're all amazing. But yeah, I think that's just, it's really, really creative. And that's a really, really cool way to make sure that you're kind of hitting what makes that character that character. See, Kat Schumacher at KATTAKIND. Yeah, so that is, again, relatively straightforward, but I think is especially good to note the creativity exhibited by Kat in that, because that's really, really cool. The next one, this is Sarah Cardona. Sarah is actually a former co-worker of ours at Steamroller Studios, who does some amazing, like mind-blowing 2D animation that she posts quite frequently on Twitter. And the handle is at Sarah, SARAE Cardona, CARDONA. And the tweet reads, it's a touch embarrassing to share, but when I first started working on that lip sync shot, my first pass was pretty awful. But I dusted myself off and thought my way through it and wrote everything down to keep in mind for my next attempt. And then she has this huge list of things that she went through that is what didn't go well and why, and like 5 or 6 things. Is there something I can do to prevent those problems from happening again? And like 6 or 7 things. And then motivation at the end that is just like 3 points about, staying motivated on the shot. And I love this. I'm obsessed with this. We could go through all the things that she puts on this, but I think it's such good self-reflection. And if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to have the same result. So you need to change the way that you attack animation, or change the way that you approach your art. And this is such a good way to do that.
The more I look at Sarah's tweet, honestly, we could do like a whole episode about each one of these. Like,
I really feel like I'm gonna blow through these, but yeah.
Yeah, like this could be a whole episode just going over like this one thing right here. But like at the basis level, like the idea that you have to be so self-reflective in your own work, and while yes, there's the saying like you're always going to be your harshest critic, it's not just, oh, I'm not as good as this, I'm not getting this. It's what, you're the only one that went through the animation as you physically did it, so you will know more things about how you did the shot than anybody else will. You might realize, all right, you have to be able to physically critique yourself in a way that's like, okay, I noodled too long here. Why did I end up noodling? Like, what triggered the noodle? How do I prevent myself from doing that in the future? And like, really, it sounds weird, but stepping outside of yourself to really be able to look at yourself almost like in third person to figure out those things, and staying motivated is a whole other topic. Physically writing it down and then having it to look back on is a strong way to actually remind yourself all the time of like what you're looking for or why you're doing something, or XYZ.
And to dive into it just a little bit, we're not going to go over every single one because, like we said, that list is really extensive, and
You should definitely take a look at it for what we
Definitely
need, though.
take a look at it. But I'm just going to try to pick some out at random. So, under the category of what didn't go well and why, something that she has highlighted is I think skipping the thumbnail stage for this one was a mistake. Placing them back in the anim is tricky, but thumbnailing the Persephone head turn and having every beat, excuse me, every beat of that one planned out beforehand definitely produced a smoother workflow. Um, it's it being, I think you just touched on this, but being reflective of yourself isn't just saying like, oh, I'm not as good as X. Being reflective of yourself is like, these are the things I did that were a mistake, and here's what I can do to fix them, which is an important distinction to make. And a lot of times people end up doing the former, and it's just sort of beating themselves with the cat o' nine tails and like, I'm not good. I'm not good enough. I need to be better. And the next time she does this, she's gonna remember this, and then she's gonna come up with another list of things, and it'll only get exponentially better. In the second category was, is there something I can do to prevent those problems from happening again? And there's a couple highlighted here. She said, you want a simple A to B to C 3-post beat. I do think that that first one is really cool because it probably just means like simplify your shot and don't try to overcomplicate it.
I know I sound like a broken record, but like animation is my one thing. So this is like I'm always going to come at it from this perspective, right? But like one of the if we look at this and we kind of combine a couple of Sarah's notes here, like knowing when like writing it down from the very beginning what your idea slash plan is, or in this case, like the ABC. Those are the three things. And then having the willpower to remind yourself of those things and then stick to them. Don't add to it. Get them in there first, and then you can start going off other places. Don't distract. Don't noodle.
And remember that, because that comes in. We have other tweets that are very
zero in and go.
Yeah. The last one was the motivation section, and these I'm just going to read these all out because there's three. The fact that this exercise is proving difficult means you'll learn a lot if you can manage to pull it off. Just really good. It's such a fantastic outlook. It's not revolutionary, but it's not mindless positivity. It's very specific positivity. Like, think about this logically. The fact that this is difficult, you will learn if you can follow your own advice. And that's the kind of motivation that you need to be giving to yourself on all your stuff. The second one is, bad art is good art because you made art. Go, 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 go.
I need that one.
Yeah, I want that on a t-shirt. And Sarah, so you can just design those and sell them, and we'll buy them. We need a merch store, Sarah. So if you want,
we'll give you commission. It was your quote.
The last one says, every big swing, creative risk you've taken has eventually yielded good results. If you keep steady and think your way through the problem, I know you can do it. It's just really, really good outlook to have on yourself. And it's just a reminder to, I'm good at this. Like, I am getting better at this every time. If I keep doing this, like, it will work out. Obviously she has, the work to back that up. And when we worked with Sarah at Steamroller, she's obviously an incredible animator.
Moral of the story, be specifically hopeful and positive.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Okay, so the next one, we're going to go to more of a animation specific, like tips and tricks sort of theme. And this is Keel Figgins. Let me bring it down and make sure I get it right.
Mr. Figgins. Everyone, you've probably seen one of
I don't know that there's a lot of if you're an animator who follows me, you probably also follow Keel Figgins. He's an anim soup at ILM London. Also has just an amazing store online where a lot of us get rigs for just fun or for reels or whatever. Also some really cool tools and scripts. But that is at Keel Figgins, KIELFIGGINS. And he says, subframes are okay. You can scale your animation without snapping to the timeline. You can bake it cleanly later, but go nuts scaling to get the feel right for the speed. And this is in reference to another tweet that said, artist, what tip really blew your mind and unlocked a new dimension of improvement for you? I probably should have led with that.
We're learning. We're learning.
Yeah, we're learning. This is such fantastic advice, though. I really, really like this because I am very precious about keyframes being on like whole numbers, and there is, it's not like there's no reason to do that. Eventually you do want to fix that for whatever reason, but get the feeling right first. Time editor isn't perfect in Maya. It's not like story mode and motion builder yet, but it's pretty good. Like it's pretty good, and you can retime your entire scene very, very easily to get the right timing and go back and clean up your work later.
And for those of us like me that don't use the time editor as often and are not as versed in it as Nate is, scaling your keys in the graph editor works too.
Totally fine. Totally fine. Yeah. One thing that I've actually, it feels like 50% of people, animators, my animators know this, and 50% don't, but you can use, you don't have to scale your keys out in the graph editor just by, marquee selecting and dragging them out. You can marquee select and then edit scale. And in the options, choose a value. You can do -1 on the value and 1 on the time, or 0 on the time, whatever your first frame is. And the value will inverse in actual, value. And then if you do that in the time box, it will flip it in time. And same way for stretching stuff out or shrinking stuff in. You don't have to just kind of eyeball it if you don't want to. If you're like very particular about like the character is a giant, or it's 4 times the size of a normal human being, so I'm gonna, whatever the math is, I'm gonna slow the speed down. Like I think it's for every double you half the speed or something like that in terms of size. Oh, there was a tweet about that. I really wish I could remember what it was. Really good. See, this is the problem with being terminally online. Anyway, Keel Figgins, amazing tweet. Banger as always. It's a every tweet's a banger. It's that, or it's a cool rig that he created. How many unstarted projects are there out there because people just, yeah, I'm gonna buy this or I'm gonna download this.
Yeah.
It looks cool, and it's just sitting in my rigs folder, eating away space.
You set the first 3 poses, and then life hit, and then you haven't gone back to it yet.
Yeah. But I played with it. I played with the rig. That's what counts. Let's see. Our next tweet is by Atelier, and the handle is at a rainy dancer, all one word. And Atelier is a game designer and indie 3D animator. And the tweet reads, I've stopped being a perfectionist with my animations about 5 years ago. My first priority is always to finish the animation according to the plan and care about how terrible the splines are later. Maybe the results aren't as good, but as long as I got it done, I got it done. And this ties into exactly what we were talking about earlier, which is the plan matters. Like, do you hit the notes? Do you hit the beats? Are you getting the feeling before you get, I'm just using this word so much, precious about your splines, about your polish? Is it accomplishing the big picture goals first? And in the context of working in games and with other departments, getting something to whatever a studio might call it, but getting things to work on the first pass in engine and be, kind of remotely readable and facing the right direction, and then going back and iterating on that. That's the goal. The goal is not to have, something that will show up in an animation handbook and be like, here's the perfect breakdown pose between these 2 key poses. Not yet, at the very least.
I completely agree. I think at the end of the day, no one's going to see the curves. So the what do you call it? The final product on screen or in engine or whatever it is, that is the end all be all at the end of the day. I will say I still care about how the curves look in blocking personally. Again, I don't want it to sound like I'm knocking anything, because that it was hammered into me to focus on the curves and the keys and everything being nice and polished. But then I've just found that as you start splining, especially in polish, especially if you're trying to hit a style. It is one of those things where I think this kind of piggybacks off of it in that you're looking at something and you're like, I just think this should hit harder.
Yeah.
Friggin' put in a key, blast the curve up. It doesn't have to look good. Does it hit the way you want it to hit without it doesn't change anything else about what's happening? Is it punching the way I want it to punch now? If yes, okay, then you adjust what broke because you threw that key in there. If not, move that new key around, leave everything else where it was. If you put that key in and it's too poppy now, all right, shift it back a frame or two. Bam.
Yeah.
All right, I nailed it. Now I can adjust everything around it as needed. Like it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I broke the arc. I need to fix this here now. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, people like Mark Masters has talked about blocking stuff out with cubes, and I do it frequently too. And that's just such a great way to get timing stuff done first before you're worried about so many other things down the line. It's a really good bit of advice to kind of remember is like, again, what's the overarching goal? What is the feel is more important than all the little polished things later because they won't be noticeable if it doesn't feel good.
And not just feel for your specific action, but if we look at it as a not games thing or as like a cinematics or film or TV thing, does it fit for what the shot's original goal was too? Like in the grand scheme of your sequence or whatever as well. All of that is priority. If you're working for somebody, it's not your art. Did you do what they asked you to do?
Yeah.
That's your job.
Yeah. The ones you do on your own, sure.
Yeah.
Next one, Melissa Moorhead. Melissa is a quality engineer at Xbox, and the handle is at N7Memo. Nemo? I don't know if that seven's an E. Anyway.
We apologize, like we said before.
We apologize, Melissa. Sorry, get hung up on the little things. The tweet reads, you know what doesn't get talked about enough in the industry? Onboarding. Having a streamlined, accountable process for introducing new hires to the rest of the team, figuring out how all the tools and equipment work, knowing where stuff is, etc., is ridiculously valuable. And there's
amen.
Yeah, there's not really a lot to expand on with this other than, I feel like this lesson learned, we should pick more controversial stuff and then you and I should just argue about it because that's fire content. But this is just straightforward.
That's content. This
like,
is just us agreeing.
It really is. And I've had incredibly good onboarding and I've had incredibly poor onboarding. And it's not all just like HR documents and understanding how to access your email account, all this other stuff.
That's the easiest part of onboarding, honestly.
Who's on my team? How does who do I report to? And is that who I go to for the little things? Is that who I go to for my one-on-ones? How does the team interact with each other? What are all the hangouts what are the tools people use? Just a million different things that if you've been there for months or years, it's you don't think about it, you just do it, and someone coming on doesn't know any of that stuff, and half the time it's just like, oh yeah, we had this tool, I forgot to tell you about it, and it's like a game-changing thing. This is my spot to mention that when I started at Bungie, it's amazing onboarding.
When I think of onboarding specifically, I don't know why I keep poking my head when I do these things, but when I think of onboarding, I also don't only think of how am I physically going to do this new job that I just got. I think it is such I don't know how to put this. It's so much better for the person coming in as the newbie to actually hear from whoever the lead or whoever is in charge of the project that they're gonna be on. I think it's a noticeable difference compared to when your onboarding is just, here's your HR person, then you get passed to an IT person, and then here's your shots. And it's like, wait, I don't know what, I read documentation, but I've literally not talked to anybody. Like, hold on. Like, when you actually hear from the person, like, hey, so I'll just use me. Hey, I'm Nick. So like, you're new to the project that we're on. So this is how stuff goes. If you have any questions, come to me
Yeah.
because, Chris is busy and I'm faster to get to. You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I think that is such a strong way to kind of build a rapport with the new person coming in,
Mhm.
that onboarding doesn't always also take, into consideration.
Yeah.
And I think that it should.
It's overwhelming to start a new job, and it's overwhelming to start a job in an industry where you're already doubting yourself all the time. Art is subjective, your work is subjective for a lot of these roles. um Obviously there are other, tons of game dev roles that are not specifically art discipline, but the onboarding part still matters. Feeling like you are a part of the team, that the effort was put forward to make you feel welcome, is incredibly important. This is, oh, here we go.
Speaking of Mark
Yeah,
Masters.
speaking of Mark Masters, the next one up is Mark Masters at Mark Masters 92. Mark is now a senior animator at Blizzard. And this is another no-brainer. The tweet reads, worked on another TV show that just came out. I was not credited. It really does make me appreciate the amazing crew on The Legend of Vox Machina and Titmouse Inc. The first thing I was asked before even completing a shot, was how I wanted my name written in the credits. And credit the artists and the developers and anyone else in any other role who worked on the game in any capacity. Everyone is a game dev and everyone deserves credit. It's not particularly difficult, and I am hard pressed to think of a reason that isn't just maliciousness or incompetence for not crediting people on stuff. And that's obviously, for another show, so it's not games, but the principle is exactly the same. Anyone who worked on it deserves credit.
I completely agree with this sentiment. Like it sucks when you're so, especially if you were excited to work on the whatever the thing was, and then you're like, oh yeah, I did that, and then you go through the credits and you're not in there. You're like, but I know I did it.
It feels like other people taking the credit for it. They're taking the credit for your time. They're taking the credit for your effort because, oh, it's not listed. It's the studio did it. Just in general, the studio, the royal we.
Like another thing too is like, I know if you're like working for a studio that was like contracted out, like I wish, I don't know what goes into these contracts or how wording works or anything like that. But even if you can't, and again, okay, this is me on my soapbox, and I obviously don't speak for any companies in this. This is a personal opinion, and I know I will never be in a position to change any of this.
Good
That all
preface.
being said, I wish that it could be part of the contracts to get the people from a secondary studio or tertiary or whoever. It doesn't have to be listed under that studio, but it would be awesome if their name could still be there.
Mhm.
Like, unless it's, just I know that sometimes there are gonna just be things where it's like we can't do it. You know what? Like at that point, out of your hands. But I wish that it could be a thing that everybody that works on something can say that they worked on it, can call their mom and be like, hey, stop the credits at 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 2 seconds, and
That
you'll see your
means a
son there.
lot. It means a lot to people, and it means a lot. And as far as, like you're saying, secondary and tertiary studios, I understand that is a thing that occurs where they, farm out work to another company or another person to do, and they're like, well, we can't tell the people who hired us that we're farming it out. So I understand where they're coming from, but that doesn't make it not, you know what I mean? That doesn't make it not
It still kind
unethical
of sucks,
or
like on some
malicious.
level.
Like I get where you're coming from. I'm still gonna say it's unethical. Like there's it just credit the
So
people who work on it. That's it.
something else that a thought that I had that isn't even taken into account from Mark's tweet is like,
Mhm.
think about all the times that you work on something that gets cut, or you work on a project that gets dropped. That's months, potentially years of work that
Yeah.
you now can't do anything with or show or do like anything with. And like I know for me, like you look at, like if I look at like my resume, I'm like, oh look, there's a year where it looks like I wasn't doing anything. I was working the whole time. I could tell you I was, but it doesn't look like I was because
Yeah.
I
And
have nothing. I have nothing to show for
for
it.
the most part, if you're if you've been in games for a while and you have other stuff that's on there, you can explain that to when you're interviewing for a job.
Face to face,
Yeah.
you can
But
explain it.
if you are your first job in the industry and you work for a year and then it all goes, uncredited or under NDA and you can't share any of it, then good, like you were there for a year. And you have nothing to show for it. We are going to take a little break because I need to start a new Zoom meeting. Zoom, sponsor the show. We're back. Zoom has decided to not sponsor the podcast. We're devastated, and we will just try to continue trucking on. So the next one up on the list is from Tom Farnsworth. At Tom from the Web is the handle. And I just want to make sure I get this one, especially this one, correct, because Tom works at Bungie.
Yeah, don't mess this one up.
Yeah, senior design lead at Bungie. And I actually have seen a few different articles that Tom has been quoted on where they just butcher what his role is and what he does. And I found that very, very funny. But it's incredibly frustrating as well. Senior
us,
design
Tom.
lead and
I
what he
hope.
does. No, not us. Yes. So the tweet reads, "It's easy to get caught up in our work, especially for creatives who are just starting out. We grow attached to our ideas, our designs, the product of our efforts. They take on a life of their own, and we give it our best to make them their best. But it's a trap. You are not your job." And that's just the first tweet. There's a whole thread that, there's, what is it? 5, 6, 7, 8 tweets in this thread that are all great. But that's really, really important to remember. Your identity is not animator. Your identity is not game designer. You need to have a life outside of this in order to be good at this. And I think some people find it difficult to do because we also, I do this for fun in my spare time too. I don't know if you know this, but I created a podcast about animation.
It's like he likes it or something.
It's like I like it or something, but it also is a key part of not beating yourself up when things aren't going well at work. That is part of the role. That's part of a job, this job that's not a part of a lot of other jobs. You just do the thing and it's done. And that's not the case here. So if you make that your identity, if you make that who you are, you're going to think that way about yourself. Realizing that you are more than just your job is very, very important. There's also, like, I won't grab all the tweets in the thread, but I think that one thing that I just want to point out is said, if you live to work, you can't turn it off, you will burn out. He's right. You will burn out on this if you are only focused on work and on nothing else. And that, I guess, that goes for most jobs and most industries. But Nick, I'm curious to hear your rebuttal to this, because this is now a fight podcast.
I have to rebut this?
No.
I mean, the only form of a rebuttal that I could give is that this work-life balance is inherently going to be tougher when you are starting out. Like, there's no getting around it. In school and just after, until you're situated in your first job, this is going to be the hardest it will be. And another aspect of this is when you are having those really tough, laborious days or shots or weeks or whatever, is not letting it take over the rest of your life as well. Like, actually being able to step away from the computer. Because if we ever get my Katie on the podcast, talk about some dark times, like, there have been some times where I've had horrible weeks, like stretches of a couple weeks back to back. I don't know if you know this, but people aren't perfect. So it can happen. You can get in a rut, man. And my fiance has seen me in a couple of reps in the time that we've been together. So like it's hard. This is one of the hardest things that you can do
We
is separate yourself from it.
Yeah, and we just had this conversation with Eddie in the last episode, and one of the things that we talked about was, if you're trying to get a job in the industry, and say, for example, you have another 9 to 5, and you're doing this in your off hours, and part of the advice was you're going to have to get comfortable with less sleep, and it's true, but it's a necessary evil. There are two sides to that. Like, I don't love that, but at the beginning, it might be necessary, but don't let that become a habit down the line. At a certain point, you will be a working professional who deserves to be treated. Well, everyone deserves to be treated with respect, but you deserve to be treated for, this is my job, my 9 to 5. I'm not going to be working on my stuff outside of work because I work remotely, even though I've been guilty of that myself.
We all do it. Like
Yeah, we all do.
it's
The key is not to be addicted to it.
the key is to know your lines, right?
Yeah.
Because this being said, like if you like, I don't know about you, but we got into animation because we enjoy it, right? Like we're artists. There are gonna be times where you get one shot that you were asking for and you're so excited for it. You're gonna put a couple of extra hours in, even if you know you shouldn't. But you know what? You balance that, you put the extra time in there. If you have a significant other or a family, you let them know, like, hey, I am going to put some extra time into this because I really want to knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And then you make that deal with yourself. Okay, I'll give myself this. I will take care of myself after. Like, not,
Yeah.
sorry, take care of yourself is the wrong way to put it, but this will not become the norm. I will not let it become expected of me to do this. Know your lines and then stick to them. It's going to be way harder at first, but you really sticking to your lines afterwards, it'll get you places, man.
Yeah, have boundaries. Have boundaries. And I think that, speaking of why we started to do this, and obviously we like animation, this is the only job I've ever had, the only hobby I've ever had where I can do this for 6 or 8 hours. If I'm in a shot where I am in the zone and this is really cool and I just need to, noodle this thing, it's the only time in my life that that's happened. I can sit down at a computer and I can do 4 or 5 hours and not look up, and I'm not gaming. I'm not something that should be like a hobby or fun. It's addicting. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. How many days do you have bid out for the shot that you're currently working on? And then we get into ghosting hours, which is a whole other situation.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't work on stuff and say that you didn't do it and that you did it in a shorter amount of time, because it makes everyone's life harder and it's also bad for you. But we're not going to end on a bummer note, as accurate as it might be. I want to end with a little funnier tweet. Funny to game dev people, maybe. This is funny. From Patrick Mills. It is at P Kernigan, Pkernaghan. Has a lot of jobs listed on his page, but the relevant one was a quest designer on Witcher 3, which is one of my favorite games and one of the reasons that I chose this tweet. And this one actually made it into a few articles online.
Start with the subtweet before you deliver.
Oh, right.
His
yes.
Tweet.
So see, good memory. This is in response to a tweet that said from Aaron and Tommy, Superpod Saga, at Superpod Saga, where I'm not gonna not promo them. And it says, "What is the most useless piece of video game knowledge you know?" The thread is fantastic. Please look at the thread and you will find out so much. But Patrick responded with, "In The Witcher 3, we needed an always running bit of logic to deliver some patch fixes, parentheses, so you get the fixes applied no matter where you were in the game. So a huge number of fixes were added to the script that governed the wandering merchants found in all areas of the game." I love game development. I love it so much. I love it so much because that is such a good solve for this situation. It's so creative. And also the merchants, the wandering merchants, are the goofiest looking people in this game. It's The Witcher 3, but they have little eyeglasses. It's amazing. Everything about it is amazing.
I would like to buy a potion and also update my game.
Like these people are running around and you're buying stuff from them and they show up in little villages and you're like, oh, it's funny. They followed me here. It's for a reason. And they had to reach you and they had to also save your game. Yeah. But that thread that he's responding to just has a lot of stuff. It reminded me of, I'm going to pull it up here because I did look at it before, but Fallout 3 had a metro train. This one's been shared quite a bit. Fallout 3 had a metro train, and the reality of it operating in the world space of the game is that it's attached to an NPC who's running around underneath the level. So the train doesn't, the player operates the train, but underneath it, what is literally making the train move, through the magic of scripting, is an NPC who's, I think it's his hand geometry is missing, and he had like that's where the hand geometry went, and it's constrained to his head or whatever, and that's how it works. And that's another.
That's incredible.
I love it. But speaking of Twitter, you can find both of us on Twitter. And I'm going to make sure I get my handle right because I chose it when I was younger and I was not in the industry, and it's incredibly embarrassing. Mine is at Wardonkey. That is at WARDONKEY. We don't have an Animators Twitter handle yet. But let me just make sure.
That feels like an oversight on our part. That should happen.
You know what? I also was posting stuff on YouTube under my personal thing. I was like, I should probably change this to animate. I shouldn't have a demo reel from like 8 years ago and then these videos. And Nick's is his name, NICKARBEITER. A lot better than Wardonkey. So
not very original, unless you consider my name original.
It is.
It's unique.
It is unique because I kept calling you Nick Arbeiter, and it's incorrect.
It bothers you more than it bothers me, man.
It really does. And every time I introduce you, I'm always like, Nick Arbeiter? Question mark?
Question
mark? I was like, yeah, that's the name.
Hasn't changed, but you got it.
Anyway, so we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for listening, as always. And you know what? I'm not going to say the thing I did last time. We will definitely be back for another one. So buckle up because it's about to get a lot more confrontational in here.
Next time, Fight Club. I don't know.